They say storms bring out the worst in people, but sometimes they bring out things that aren't people at all. My name is Mark, and I don't expect anyone to believe what I'm about to tell you. It happened 3 weeks ago, during the worst flood this country's seen in decades. My wife and I were stranded on a country road somewhere out past Devon. We thought we were lucky when we found shelter, but that place, the Weeping Ram, it wasn't a shelter. It was a grave that just hadn't been filled yet. So if you're listening to this and you ever find yourself on an empty road with the rain closing in, remember my story. And whatever you do, don't answer the knock on your window. I never used to be the kind of person who believed in bad luck. Flat tires, flooded roads, wrong turns. They're just things that happen. Random, meaningless. At least that's what I told myself before that night. The knock on the van window might as well have come from outer space. 1 second, it was just a storm and the sound of rain hammering against the metal roof. And the next, there was that sharp, deliberate tap, tap, tap on the driver's side glass. We both jumped. Leslie, my wife, actually gasped loud enough to make our friends in the back, Ryan and Meg, stir awake. Outside, it was pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows everything. The wipers fought the flood of rain, but I couldn't see a thing except the warped reflection of my own headlights. Another knock, 3 quick raps. Someone was definitely out there. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the switch. You hear stories. You know, hook-handed killers, couples stranded in the middle of nowhere. Those urban legends everyone laughs about, until you find yourself parked on a deserted country lane in the middle of a storm that's drowning half the country. Then a muffled voice came through the glass. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I heard it again, low, desperate. "Wouldn't stay here," it said. I rolled the window down a few inches. "Sorry, what?" The man leaned forward, shoving his head through the gap, just far enough for me to see his face in the streaking rain. He looked about 70, maybe older, with eyes so pale they almost glowed in the lightning. "You can't stay here," he shouted over the storm. "This lane'll be underwater by midnight." "Oh." I tried to sound casual, but my stomach dropped. We hadn't parked there by choice. Every hotel within 50 miles was either flooded or packed full of evacuees. The van was our last resort, our shelter for the night. "Do you know anywhere we can go?" Leslie asked, leaning across me. The old man grimaced. "Not around my land. Not after last time." He glanced towards the back of the van, his gaze lingering too long. Maybe it was the bong or Ryan and Meg half asleep in their sleeping bags. Either way, something seemed to amuse him. He snorted, not falling for that again. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, "Best bet it'd be the Weeping Ram." The what, I asked. "The Weeping Ram Inn, half an hour up the road." Leslie grabbed her phone. "How do you spell that?" "Won't find it online," he said. "Just keep straight and take the third right. You'll see the sign." She nodded, jotting notes into her phone, as if we were planning a road trip, and not sitting in a thunderstorm, with a stranger's rain-soaked face inches from ours. Something about him made my skin crawl. The way he lingered, the way his mouth seemed to twitch when he spoke. I just wanted him gone. When he finally stepped back into the rain and disappeared into the dark, I turned to Leslie. "I'm tempted to stay here anyway," I muttered, starting the engine. "Probably just wants us off his land." "Yeah, but if he's right, and it floods..." Ryan's voice came from the back, sleepy, worried. "Please don't sink my van, man. It's literally all I own." He was right, and so was Leslie. We couldn't risk it. Fine, I said. The weeping ram it is. I followed Leslie's directions straight then, the third right. The road narrowed into gravel, winding between hedges that whipped at the van as we passed. The headlights caught nothing but rain and mud and the occasional lonely tree. It was the kind of drive where you lose all sense of direction, like the world had folded in on itself. By the time we finally saw a flicker of light, I wasn't sure if I was relieved or terrified. A single lantern glowed beside an old hand-painted sign swinging in the wind. A sheep's face stared down at us, its eyes dripping streaks of red paint that looked too much like tears. The weeping ram. Leslie touched my arm. It's quaint. Her voice was forced, like she was trying to convince herself. I parked in a small gravel lot beside the building. From the outside, it looked like something from a fairy tale thatched, roof-white plaster walls, ivy crawling up the sides. But there was something wrong about it. The air felt heavier here, like even the storm refused to come too close. Ryan peered through the window. Place looks empty. Good, I said. Maybe that means rooms are available. Leslie laughed softly, but it didn't sound natural. Let's just check. 5 minutes. If it's weird, we leave. I wanted to agree, but something inside me, that small primal voice that only speaks when it knows you're in danger, told me we should have turned around right then, because the moment we stepped out into the rain and I looked up at the second floor window, I could have sworn someone was already there, watching. A silhouette, still, perfectly still. And when the lightning flashed, it didn't move. When we stepped out of the van, the rain eased for just a moment, long enough for us to hear the wind dragging itself through the trees. The whole world smelled like mud and rot. The inn stood ahead of us, half hidden behind a low stone wall, and a field drowned in puddles. Every window was dark, except one, a faint amber glow that flickered like a candle behind dirty glass. Leslie grabbed my arm as we crossed the lot. See lights on. That means someone's awake. She sounded more hopeful than sure. The sign above the door crooned on its rusty hinges, the words, "The Weeping Ram," barely visible beneath layers of paint. A carved ram's head hung beneath it, its wooden eyes glistening wet in the rain. Whoever carved it had given the thing human-like tears running down its cheeks. I didn't like it. The door was heavier than it looked. It scraped across the stone as I pushed it open. The smell hit me first dust mildew, and something faintly sweet like rotting fruit. Inside was dim. A few candles burned in wall sconces, and their flames shivered in the draft. There was no one behind the bar, no voices, no footsteps, just the slow drip of rainwater somewhere in the ceiling. "Hello," I called out. My voice sounded too loud, like it didn't belong here. The place looked like it had been left untouched for decades. 4 tables, 2 booths, a stone fireplace filled with cold ashes. Cobwebs hung thick between the rafters. Ryan whistled low. Damn, this place is ancient. Meg stepped closer to one of the tables and ran a finger through the dust. No kidding. I think this stuff's older than me. Leslie laughed nervously, the sound bouncing off the walls. Maybe they're just rustic. I didn't answer. I was staring at the bar. Behind the counter were empty shelves and 2 dusty beer taps. The mirror behind them was so cloudy, I couldn't see my reflection, just a smudge that moved when I did. For a moment, I thought I saw something else move behind the bar in the darkness beyond the doorway. It was small, quick. "Do you think someone's back there?" Leslie whispered. I didn't want to find out. but something about the stillness made it impossible not to look. I stepped behind the bar, pushing through the swinging door into the narrow space beyond. It was a kitchen, or had been. Pans hung from hooks rusted through. A layer of dust coated everything. The air was colder here, thicker. Then my light caught a face. I nearly dropped my phone. An old woman was standing in the corner facing me, hands folded in front of her, like she'd been waiting. Her skin was paper white, her eyes wide and unblinking. She smiled a horrible fixed smile, and for a heartbeat, I thought she was alive. But she didn't move, not an inch. I forced out a shaky laugh. Jesus, it's a mannequin. Except, it wasn't. When I stepped closer, I saw the faint lines of veins beneath her skin, the downy hair on her cheeks, the tiny age spots along her temples. Whoever made her had captured every impossible detail. Unless I called my voice too thin. No answer. Guys, there's something you should see. I backed toward the doorway, not taking my eyes off that thing. And then, without a sound, it was gone. I stumbled into the main room, heart hammering. Leslie, Rye, and Meg. They looked up from the fireplace, startled. Hey, what's wrong? Leslie asked. I started to explain, but a voice cut through the air behind me. Oh, you poor things. She was standing there. The same woman from the kitchen, smiling warmly, like a grandmother who'd just found lost children. Her clothes were identical, long dark dress apron, tied at the waist hair, pinned tight. But her face was alive. Oh my, she said, stepping closer. You're drenched. Come in, come in. I can't believe you made it all the way out here in this weather. Leslie, ever polite, smiled back. We're sorry to intrude. We were told you might have rooms available. The woman's smile faltered for just a second, then returned. Oh, we're not exactly open for business tonight, but well, I can't possibly turn you away. Not in this storm. She reached out and touched Leslie's arm. Her skin looked waxy, stretched too tightly over her knuckles. Thank you, Leslie said softly. I couldn't move. My mouth was dry. I kept thinking about the woman I'd seen in the kitchen, motionless staring. Don't just stand there, dear, the old woman said, glancing back at me. Come warm yourself. I'll fetch some towels. When she turned away, I caught the smallest flicker of movement beneath her hairline, like a crack. A fine seam running from her temple to her jaw. I blinked. It was gone. She disappeared into the hallway, humming under her breath. The melody was old, almost childlike. Leslie squeezed my hand. She seemed sweet. She's the same woman I saw in the kitchen, I whispered. But I swear to God, she was just standing there. Not moving. Like she wasn't real. Leslie frowned. Maybe you imagined it. You're tired. Maybe I was. But when the old woman Bernadette, as we later learned, returned with towels and tea, she looked at me and smiled. And in that instant, I knew she'd heard every word. Bernadette moved with a strange stiffness, as if every step was something she had to remember how to do. Her shoes barely made a sound on the stone floor, yet I could hear the faintest creak of her joints, like old wood shifting in a storm. She led us through a narrow hallway that smelled of damp linen and cold ash. At the end, a crooked staircase rose into the shadows above. Only 2 rooms tonight, she said, without turning back. But that should do, shouldn't it? Leslie nodded quickly. Of course. Anything's fine. I wanted to ask what she meant by only 2 rooms, but something about her tone, gentle but distant, made me keep quiet. Upstairs, the air was different, thicker somehow. The wallpaper was stained brown from years of smoke, and the old carpet felt soft, in a way that made my stomach turn, like it hadn't been cleaned in decades. Bernadette stopped at the top of the stairs and turned toward us. Her face looked softer in the candlelight, but her eyes caught the light strangely almost reflective. "You'll be comfortable here. Room 1 for you two." She gestured to Leslie and me, "and room 2 for your friends." Ryan gave her a friendly nod. "Thanks, sir." "Miss Bernadette." She smiled. "You can just call me Bernadette, dear." Then she glanced down the hall toward a door at the far end, the only one she hadn't mentioned. Her eyes lingered there for a beat too long. No one spoke. Finally, she turned back. "You may hear the house settle during the night. The rain finds its way in, and the old wood protests. Don't be alarmed." Leslie smiled politely. "Thank you. We'll be fine." Bernadette's smile widened too wide. "Of course you will." When she handed me the keys, her fingers brushed mine. They were cold. Not the kind of cold you get from bad circulation, but the kind that comes from something that hasn't been alive in a very long time. Then she left us her humming, fading down the stairs. We stood in silence for a while, the four of us, staring at each other in the dim glow of the hallway candle. "Well," Ryan said, "finally that was different." Meg yawned. "At least it's dry." Leslie unlocked our room and pushed the door open. The hinges groaned like an animal in pain. Inside, everything looked perfectly preserved from another century. A brass bed with a faded quilt, a small dresser, a cracked mirror. There were no outlets, no lamps, just a single candle burning on the nightstand. Leslie stepped in first, shivering. "I feel like we just checked into a museum." I didn't answer. I was looking at the walls. They were covered in photographs, old black and white portraits of people who never smiled. Farmers, children couples, all with the same strange glossy eyes that seemed to catch the light even in the dark. Creepy Leslie murmured, "Yeah." I turned one of the frames slightly, and a puff of dust rose from behind it. The wallpaper underneath was darker stained by time, or maybe by something else. We unpacked quietly. The storm still raged outside wind, clawing at the thatch roof, the distant groan of thunder rolling across the hills. Ryan and Meg called through the wall, saying goodnight, and after that, the inn was silent. Leslie changed into a dry shirt and crawled under the covers. "It's not so bad," she said. "Just old." I tried to believe her, but as I turned off the candle and lay beside her, something caught my eye the window. It was open a crack. I was sure it hadn't been before. I got up and crossed the room. The wind had died down, yet a faint dripping sound came from outside, steady and deliberate. I leaned close to the glass. There was a handprint there, small pale pressed into the condensation. I stared at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It was shaped like a child's hand, but the fingers were too long. Behind me, Leslie mumbled in her sleep. I told myself it was just a trick of the moisture, that the print had been there for years. I shut the window and wiped it away. Back in bed, I listened to the sounds of the inn, the wind sighing through the beams, the occasional pop of the old wood, the drip of rainwater through the gutters. Then, somewhere down the hall, I heard something else. A slow, deliberate creak, like someone walking barefoot across the floorboards. I waited for it to stop. It didn't. Step, step, step. It paused outside our door. I held my breath. Leslie stirred beside me, but didn't wake. Then came a whisper, soft, almost playful. "Good night." I froze. The words were spoken through the keyhole, right at ear level. I wanted to leap up to fling the door open, but I couldn't move. Every part of me was locked in place, pinned by fear. After a few seconds, the footsteps moved on, fading down the hall until there was nothing but the storm again. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound to return. It never did. At some point before dawn, I finally drifted off, half dreaming, half awake, still holding my wife's hand beneath the covers. When I woke again, the candle on the nightstand had burned down to a puddle of wax, and the handprint on the window was back. Only this time, it was on the inside. I woke to silence. That thick, unnatural kind of silence that only comes after hours of rain. The storm had passed, but the world felt heavier for it, like the air itself was swollen with water. The first thing I noticed was the cold. The second was that Leslie wasn't beside me. Her side of the bed was empty, the quilt thrown back the pillow still faintly warm. At first, I thought she'd gone downstairs for tea, or maybe to check on our friends. But the longer I sat there listening, the more I realized I couldn't hear anything. No footsteps, no voices, not even the creak of floorboards. The inn was dead quiet. I called her name once, twice. No answer. I climbed out of bed, pulled on my jeans, and opened the door. The hallway was dim and grey, with early light leaking in through a cracked window at the far end. The air smelled damp, like old wood and rain-soaked wool. Leslie. The word came out softer than I meant it to, swallowed by the corridor. Something shifted a few doors down, a soft thud, like someone dropping a shoe. I followed the sound toward Ryan and Meg's room. The door was open. The first thing I saw was the mess, the bed-unmade blankets, twisted one of Ryan's shoes, lying upside down on the floor. The second thing I saw was his phone still plugged into a charger by the mattress, the screen spiderwebbed with cracks. Meg, Ryan. Nothing. The window in their room was open wider than ours had been. The curtains stirred in the faint breeze tapping against the wall in a slow rhythm. That's when I noticed the smell. Not quite rot, not quite mildew, something metallic, almost sweet. I stepped closer to the window. The view outside was just fog and trees. The rain had turned the fields into shallow pools that reflected the dim morning light. I could hear water trickling somewhere far below. Maybe from the hill we'd driven down the night before. I should have left right then. Should have grabbed the keys, run to the van, and driven until I hit the main road again. But I didn't, because I couldn't leave Leslie. I turned back toward the hall and froze. There was something on the floor just outside the room, a faint trail of wet footprints, small and bare, leading toward the stairs. So I whispered again. Nothing. I followed them. Each print was faint, like whoever made them was only half there. They led down the creaking staircase to the ground floor, then across the narrow hall to a door I hadn't noticed before. It was half open. Beyond it, darkness. I hesitated at the threshold, every instinct screaming at me to stop. But I couldn't. I stepped inside. The air changed instantly, damp, heavy cold. The smell was stronger here. The faint scent of something dead mixed with varnish. I used my phone's flashlight. The beam cut through the dark and revealed walls lined with shelves, and on those shelves were animals. Dozens of them. Foxes, badgers, rabbits, all perfectly still, perfectly preserved. Their glass eyes caught the light and sent it glinting back at me. Some were missing fur, some were stitched clumsily together, but all of them wore the same empty expression, like something that used to be alive had been replaced with an imitation that didn't quite understand what life meant. In the center of the room stood a dog, a Dalmatian, its head tilted unnaturally to one side, its mouth frozen in what might have been a grin. I felt sick. I took a step closer without meaning to. The floor creaked. For a second, I thought I saw its chest rise. No, that was impossible. I leaned in. The eyes were glass, the fur stiff with dust. It was just another piece of taxidermy. I turned to leave and heard claws on the floor behind me. Click, click, click. I spun around the light, jerking across the walls. The Dalmatian was gone. My heart slammed against my ribs. Something brushed my leg, wet and cold. I stumbled backward, trying to catch sight of it, but the flashlight only caught the blur of movement, vanishing into the shadows near the far wall. The air filled with a faint, scratching sound, like nails on wood, coming from somewhere beneath my feet. I swallowed hard. Leslie. No answer. Then from the darkness ahead, something moved again, slowly, deliberately. The Dalmatian was standing at the foot of a narrow staircase I hadn't noticed before. It stared at me, head lopsided, tongue hanging loose. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then it turned and descended the stairs, disappearing into the dark below. Every rational thought I had screamed for me to run, to get out. But there was something about the way it moved, steady, unhurried, that made me think it wanted me to follow. Maybe Leslie was down there. Maybe this nightmare had an explanation waiting beneath the floor. I took a deep breath and stepped toward the stairs. The wood groaned beneath my feet, old and swollen from the rain. Each step down felt like sinking deeper into the earth. The air grew colder, thicker, until I could taste the damp in my mouth. At the bottom, the flashlight revealed stone walls slick with moisture. Crates and broken furniture were stacked against one side, and puddles of water covered the floor. The sound of dripping filled the silence. And there in the far corner, something massive loomed in the dark. A circular shape, rough stone waist high, an old well. The wood covering it was black with mold, sealed tight with rusted nails. For the first time that night, I felt something like recognition, like I'd seen it before. Maybe in a dream, maybe in a nightmare I hadn't realized was real. The Dalmatian was gone, but its paw prints were still visible in the thin layer of mud on the floor circling the well. I approached slowly, the light trembling in my hand. The air above the well felt wrong too, still like the rest of the basement was holding its breath. Somewhere deep inside that darkness, I thought I heard water move. Then a voice, soft, wet, and familiar. Mark. It was Leslie. Leslie. I ran forward, scanning the room. Where are you? No answer. Just a faint splash. I leaned over the edge of the well. The light barely reached the surface of the water below, but for a second I saw it. A pale hand breaking the surface fingertips, slick and grey. Leslie. The hand withdrew into the dark. Something else moved beneath the surface, something bigger. I staggered back, and that's when I heard another sound. Footsteps on the stairs behind me. Slow, heavy. Bernadette, I whispered. But whoever or whatever was coming down wasn't in any hurry. The steps were deliberate, careful, as if savoring each one. I turned toward the staircase, and what I saw there wasn't human. At first, I thought the shape on the stairs was a trick of the light, some warped shadow from my flashlight trembling in my hand. But it moved, slowly. Each step creaked beneath it as it descended. Bernadette. My voice barely left my throat. The thing stopped halfway down the stairs. The light caught her face, the same face I'd seen upstairs, the one that had smiled so sweetly at Leslie just hours before. Only now the skin looked wrong, loose, as if it was slipping away from the bone beneath. Her eyes didn't blink. Her lips peeled back in that impossible grin. "Oh, you found it," she said. Her voice was soft, but it filled the entire room. "It's been so long since anyone's come down here." I backed up, almost slipping on the wet floor. "Where's Leslie?" Bernadette tilted her head. The skin of her neck folded like wax melting in heat. "She's close," she said. "They always are." The air felt thicker, like it was alive. I couldn't breathe. Right, the scent of mold, damp stone, and something else sweet and rotten filled my lungs. "Stay away from me," I said. She smiled wider. "Oh, my dear, I don't hurt anyone. That's my brother's gift." Her brother. The word made my stomach twist. She stepped down the last stair, her bare feet landing silently on the flooded floor. And that's when I realized she wasn't walking on the water. She was standing in it, but it didn't ripple around her legs. The surface stayed perfectly still. "You shouldn't have come here," she whispered. "He doesn't like it when people see his work before it's finished." I didn't move. My back was against the wall. Now the beam of my flashlight jerking wildly as I tried to keep her in its glare. "What are you talking about?" Bernadette looked toward the well. "Do you know what it's like to fall apart?" she said. Her tone had changed soft dreamy, to feel your bones break one by one and know you'll never be put back together. "My brother fixed me. He always fixes what's broken." "Where's Leslie?" I shouted. Her eyes flicked back to me. "She's being made beautiful again." Something inside me snapped. I lunged forward, swung the flashlight like a weapon. It hit her shoulder with a dull thud. The impact sent a burst of dust into the air, but she didn't move, didn't flinch. Instead, her head turned slowly, the neck twisting far too far. That wasn't very nice. She reached for me. I stumbled backward and fell against the well. My flashlight slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor, spinning once before, coming to rest with its beam pointed straight up. The cellar filled with shadows that seemed to crawl across the walls. Then I heard it again, that faint sound from below. A splash, a breath, a whisper. "Mark." It was Leslie. Her voice echoed up through the stones, warped and hollow. "Leslie, I'm here." Bernadette stopped and tilted her head, smiling like a proud parent. "See, she's nearly ready." I pushed myself up and grabbed the flashlight, shining it straight into her face. The light peeled away everything I hadn't wanted to see: the cracks along her cheeks, the dry, flaking skin, the seams running down her arms like someone had stitched her together and painted over the lines. And underneath it all, I could see what she truly was. Not flesh, not human, something hollow. Bernadette moved closer. "He'll be so pleased to meet you. He loves new friends." I backed away until my legs hit the side of the well. I could hear the water shifting below, something big moving just out of sight. Then came a sound. I'll never forget: a wet hand slapping against the inside of the stone. Another. Then another. Bernadette's eyes lit up with delight. "He's awake." The lid of the well groaned, the nails bending the wood, splitting under the pressure from below. Water spilled over the sides, black and slick. Something was trying to climb out. Bernadette reached toward it, whispering like she was soothing a frightened child. "It's all right, brother. I brought them. You can fix them too." I didn't wait to see what came next. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a rusted metal rod from one of the broken crates, and swung it at her with everything I had. It hit her in the chest. The sound wasn't what I expected. Not bone, not flesh. Wood? The skin split open and sawdust poured out. Bernadette let out a sharp gasp, then laughed. "Oh, my poor boy," she said. Do you really think pain matters to something that's already dead? I ran. The stairs were slick under my feet, my hands scrambling for the railing. But before I reached the second step, something cold and strong wrapped around my ankle. I fell hard, my face hitting the wood. The light tumbled from my hand, again landing upside down, casting the entire cellar into shifting darkness. I looked back. Bernadette was holding me, her grip impossibly strong. Her eyes glowed faintly like embers. "Don't struggle," she said gently. "He hates when they struggle." From the well came a new sound, the splash of something large hitting the water, followed by a low, wet groan. I kicked as hard as I could, connecting with her shoulder. Something snapped. Her arm bent backward at an impossible angle, but she didn't react. She just kept smiling, that same motherly, patient smile. And then Mark. The voice made me freeze. It was Leslie again, but this time it wasn't echoing from the well. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs, barefoot, soaked her eyes wide with confusion. Leslie. She blinked at me like she was half asleep. I don't know what happened. I was dreaming. And then I woke up down here. "Get back," I shouted. "Don't come near her." But Bernadette had already turned. "Ah," she said sweetly. "There you are, dear." Leslie stepped forward, shivering. Who are you?" Bernadette's head tilted, and that awful seam down her face stretched wider. "I'm family," she whispered. "And so are you." Before I could move, Bernadette lunged. Leslie screamed, grabbing a broken plank from one of the crates and swinging it wildly. The wood splintered across Bernadette's arm, sending a burst of dust and shavings into the air. I scrambled to my feet, grabbed the same plank, and together, we drove her back toward the well. She stumbled, her legs creaking like timber in a storm. "Stop," she shrieked. "He'll fix you too. Stay away from us," I yelled, and with one final shove, we sent her tumbling backward. She hit the well's edge, teetered for a moment, and fell. The sound she made as she hit the water was thick and heavy, like wet fabric sinking into mud. For a second, everything was still. Then from below came a splash, and another voice. Deeper this time, older. "She's broken again." Leslie grabbed my arm. "Mark, we need to go. Now." We ran. Up the stairs through the narrow hallway, past the empty bar and the cold fireplace. The whole building seemed to groan and shift around us, as if it were breathing. Outside, the rain had started again, soft, steady, washing the mud from our feet as we sprinted to the van. I didn't look back until we were halfway down the lane. Through the sheets of rain, I saw the outline of the inn fading into the fog, its windows glowing faintly from within. And for a moment, just a moment, I saw her standing in the doorway, drenched and smiling, her hand raised in a slow, deliberate wave. Then the lights went out. We didn't stop driving for what felt like hours. The storm swallowed the road, and the wipers screeched across the glass in a rhythm that felt too much like breathing. Neither of us spoke. Leslie sat rigid in the passenger seat, wrapped in one of the blankets from the back, her face pale and her lips trembling. When the lights of a highway finally appeared on the horizon, I almost cried. Civilization, street lamps, the sound of other engines, people. I pulled over at the first lay-by I found killed the engine and just sat there with my hands gripping the wheel. For a long time, all I could hear was the ticking of the cooling engine and the faint patter of rain. Leslie turned to me. Her voice was hoarse. "Did that really happen?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How do you explain what we'd seen? A woman filled with sawdust, a voice in the dark calling itself a brother, a well that breathed. Finally, I managed, I don't know. She pressed her palms to her face. I dreamed of him, Mark, before I woke up down there. A boy. He told me his sister had fallen into the well. He said he could fix her. That's what he said, fix. Her words made my skin crawl. We're alive, I said. That's what matters. We're out. But even as I said it, the air inside the van felt wrong. Too still, too heavy. Like something else was breathing with us. Leslie's eyes flicked toward the back. What about them? I froze. I hadn't thought about Ryan and Meg since we'd run. The last I saw of their room, it had been empty. Slowly, I twisted in my seat and looked behind me. Their sleeping bags were there, side by side, zipped shut. For a heartbeat, I let myself believe they'd somehow made it back to the van, that maybe they were asleep. Maybe everything had just been a nightmare. But then I saw it. The way the fabric was pulled too tight, the way it didn't move at all. Not a breath, not a twitch. Ryan, I whispered. Nothing. Meg Leslie reached out and unzipped one of the bags. What was inside wasn't human. It was them and not them. Their faces were pale, waxy eyes open, and glassy lips parted like mannequins caught mid-sentence. Their hands were clasped together, fingers stiff and wrong, skin stretched thin over shapes that didn't belong there. Leslie made a choking sound and stumbled back. Oh my God, she gasped. Mark, are they? I don't know, I said, but the word died in my throat. Because as I stared, I saw something move. Meg's chest, just a little. Her lips trembled, a faint sound leaking out between them, dry, cracked, almost too soft to hear. I leaned closer, my heart hammering. Meg, it's okay. You're safe. We got out. Her eyes rolled toward me, unfocused, glossy, with tears that didn't fall. Her mouth opened wider. It hurts, she whispered. The words were faint, raw, the sound of something that shouldn't be able to speak. Leslie shook her head, tears running down her face. We have to help her. We have to do something. I reached for my phone, but the screen was dead, the battery swollen and cracked. Leslie's phone was gone, lost in the basement. We were alone. It hurts, Meg said again, louder this time. Her hand twitched. A flake of pale skin peeled away from her wrist and fell onto the floor like ash. Underneath it was wood. I backed away, shaking my head. No, that's not possible. Ryan's body shifted beside her, a brittle crack sounding deep in his chest, and then his lips moved too. It hurts, he echoed. Leslie screamed. I slammed the van door open and stumbled out into the cold morning air, retching into the mud. The sun was just beginning to rise, bleeding pale light across the soaked fields. The world looked normal again, clean, washed, quiet. But behind me, through the open door, I could still hear them whispering. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. Leslie's voice broke through the sound. Mark, we have to go to the police. I wiped my mouth and turned back. And tell them what that a living doll tried to feed us, to her dead brother. They'll lock us up. She climbed out of the van shaking. We can't just leave them. I looked back inside. The sleeping bags were still. The words had stopped. For a moment, it almost looked peaceful. Then I saw Meg's eyes. They were watching me. Get in the van, I whispered. What, get in? I started the engine hands, trembling on the wheel. Leslie climbed in beside me, still crying, still shaking her head. As we pulled onto the road, I caught one last glimpse of them in the rearview mirror. Meg's lips were moving again, forming words I couldn't hear over the roar of the engine. I didn't want to. We drove until the storm was a memory, and the road turned from dirt to asphalt. Town signs appeared, familiar names, gas stations, power lines, civilization. But the relief never came. Because no matter how far we drove, I could still feel it, that pull, that connection to the thing beneath the well. Like a string tied around my ribs, dragging me back toward that house. Leslie slept for a while, her head against the window. I kept my eyes on the road, praying for the sun to rise higher, for the world to look normal again. But the clouds never fully broke. The light stayed grey, muted, sickly. At some point, Leslie stirred beside me. "Mark, yeah." She frowned, her voice small. "Do you hear that? I didn't want to ask, but I did." Hear what she pointed toward the back of the van. I listened. There it was, faint, muffled, steady. A sound like something shifting inside the sleeping bags. Then very softly from behind us. "It hurts." I pressed harder on the gas, and I didn't look back again. It's been 3 weeks since that night. I haven't slept properly since. Every time I close my eyes, I hear it, that voice from the back of the van. That soft, broken whisper. "It hurts." The police didn't believe a word of it. They found the van where I left it, miles from the old road. Leslie and I were taken and questioned for hours. They said we were lucky to be alive, but their eyes said something else, that we weren't victims, that we were suspects. When they searched the van, the sleeping bags were empty. No bodies, no signs of anyone else. Just damp blankets and the faint smell of wood shavings. They found nothing at the address we gave them either. No inn, no weeping ram. Just an overgrown field beside a half-collapsed stone wall, a rusted signpost, and a patch of ground that had sunk into a shallow depression, like something heavy had been buried there and then forgotten. One of the officers told me the nearest structure in that area burned down in 1981. He said it used to be a small pub, family-run, before it was condemned. 2 deaths, a brother and sister. The report said they were found in the basement. The sister's body was intact, but dry, brittle, packed with sawdust. The brother was never found. I remember how calm the officer was as he read it from his notes, how his voice didn't waver once. Then he looked up at me and said, "You've probably been under a lot of stress. Sometimes trauma makes the mind fill in the blanks." He didn't see what I saw. He didn't hear it. Leslie won't talk about it anymore. She's trying to move on therapy, medication, friends. She told me she doesn't dream about the well anymore. But I do. Every single night. In the dreams, I'm standing at the bottom of that cellar again. The air is damp, the walls dripping. Bernadette's voice comes first soft and sweet, then the sound of something moving below the water. Sometimes I hear Leslie too. Sometimes I hear Ryan and Meg whispering from the dark. And sometimes I hear my own voice calling back to them. I moved into a small apartment near the city. I keep the curtains drawn, keep the lights low. I've tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that maybe it was carbon monoxide poisoning or some kind of shared delusion brought on by fear and exhaustion. But then, 2 nights ago, I heard something against my window. A faint tap, 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 just like that first night in the van. When I pulled back the curtain, there was no one there. Only a single wet handprint on the glass. Small, perfect, pressed from the inside. And when I wiped it away, I saw the faintest streak of sawdust clinging to the moisture. Now I keep the window closed at all times. The air inside my room smells faintly of rain and old wood. And sometimes, when the night goes very still, I swear I can hear something shifting behind the walls, slow, careful, deliberate. "It hurts," they whisper. Always the same words, always the same voice. I try not to listen. I tell myself, It's just the pipes or the wind or the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in the dark. But I know better, because every time I breathe, I can taste it. The faint sweetness of sawdust and the smell of water that hasn't seen the sun in a very, very long time. So if you ever find yourself driving down a flooded country road and an old man tells you to head for the Weeping Ram, don't. Keep driving, no matter how hard it rains. Don't look back. Don't stop. And if you ever hear that knock on your window, for the love of God, don't open it. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening. I keep hoping that telling this story might make the dreams stop. But they haven't. Some nights, I still hear them. The whispering, the scratching in the walls, and that soft broken voice saying, "It hurts." Maybe the storm never really ended. Maybe I never really left that place. If you see the Weeping Ram, keep driving. And if you don't believe me, I hope you never have to. Optional channel tagline for your NightLore host voice after the story. This story was The Weeping Ram, written and adapted for NightLore, where every story leaves a shadow. Subscribe for more true nightmares, and remember, not every road leads home.